When I mention Lincoln Riley, you probably have a strong opinion. I haven't met a lot of people in this world that have a lukewarm thought about Lincoln Riley's career up to this point. He's still a young coach, but he has grown in so much success so quickly and has made such polarizing moves within his career that everybody, it seems like, has a strong opinion. If you live in Norman, Oklahoma or Southern California, you probably despise the man up to this point. Or if you're on the other side of the coin, you have respect for the offensive system that he's been able to build and has been able to produce three, not one, not two, but three Heisman winners. That's not nothing, especially over the course of just 10 years. And I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that some of the decisions that he has made over the course of his career, retaining defensive coordinators, leaving programs in the dust, were good moves for his career and that they were morally correct. What I want to focus on is schematically, what has he done different than other offensive coordinators or offensive-minded head coaches with the system of the air raid that has been able to produce some of the best quarterback seasons that we have ever seen in the sport of college football. And plus, I will take any opportunity to talk about the history of the air raid and the air raid system in of itself, because it's one of my favorites. And I have a lot of respect in the sense of Lincoln Riley being able to take the weaknesses of the air raid system and being able to transform it into a way that helps the quarterback, especially at the next level, which we'll talk about today, and answer the question, why has this offensive system been so good to quarterbacks and be able to produce some of the best seasons we've ever seen? But before we dive in, if you're returning, you know what I'm about to say. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to talk football with you, because if you're new around here, all I'll ever ask from you is to give me an opportunity to talk football with you, whether it's a like, a comment, a subscribe, anything across the board means the world to me. I also want to float out the idea that in the description, I've put the email for this show. It means the world. Whenever you guys send me an email, giving me suggestions, giving me just kind words. Honestly, I am a one-man army over here. I'm building the scripts. I'm building the editing platform. I'm recording all the different things. It's just me over here. It means the world whenever you guys give me support or suggestions that I may not be thinking about, so I can implement them into the videos. But we could go ahead and dive right on in. What has Lincoln Riley done to the modern air raid system to make it just so damn effective? So where in the world and why did the air raid come into fruition? This system was born in the late 1980s, developed by Hal Mumm and, God rest his soul, Mike Leach, which, by the way, is part of the reason why I wanted to make today's video, was just to be able to talk about Mike Leach, who should be in the College Football Hall of Fame, but I can complain and vent about that another day. They started off in a small Iowa college, which allowed for them to experiment a little bit more and have a little bit more innovation without the worry of their jobs at a larger school. And during the late 1980s, the passing attack was not prevalent at all. It was the ground and pound being more physical than the other team. Some may say that's real football, as well as the wing T formations and the wishbone and all these different things was the most pressing offensive innovation that you would see in the sport of football. And they looked at who had the most innovative passing attack, and they look at a guy named Lavelle Edwards at BYU and some of the concepts around him. They were able to design an offense that prioritized spreading the field and creating space. They aimed to maximize the use of the entire field, forcing defenses to cover more ground. Now, to us, a lot of our modern college football fans or people that have watched everything since 2010, this may seem like a normal idea. Use the entire field to the best of your capability. But back at the time, like I mentioned, it was about physicality, condensed I-form formations. Can you outmaneuver? Can you outmuscle the other man in front of you versus spreading out the field and out finessing them and being more sneaky about it, just getting the ball into space? It was not the football that was played back then. And so this was very innovative and honestly kind of ballsy. And for a while, the air raid offense was seen as a gimmick. And one of those innovations in the quote unquote gimmick playbook was allowing the players to focus on execution and repetition rather than complexity. This approach meant fewer plays, but higher precise execution, making it easier for the players to master their roles. Because just think about it like this from their perspective, especially if they're at a lower talent level as a school, being able to try to compete with the larger schools with more talent? Can you execute on 10 plays at an A+ level versus 25 at a B- level? I would take those 10 plays and be able to repeat them, because at the end of the day, a lot of college football comes just straight down to execution. I understand a lot of people complain about that whenever a head coach hops onto the press box or the press conference and says, oh, it's all about execution, that's why we lost today. And they get really frustrated because X, Y, and Z as a fan. But truthfully, that's all it is. I understand I have a lot of coaches that watch these videos. I guarantee you they're going to agree with me. It comes down to execution. And Mike Leach and Hal Mumm just took it as simple as, okay, we're going to condense the playbook, look at our talent level, say who can play these roles at a very, very high level, and rinse and repeat them. Sure, they're not going to be as complex, but if you can execute really simple plays at a high level, you're going to find success. And that starts to dive into what is the philosophy of an air raid attack. If you don't know what I'm talking about up to this point in the video, we're going to be talking about passing concepts a lot, almost exclusively. During a time that it was about running the football, this was a passing offense. And so that's why it was seen as a gimmick, and it didn't come to fruition or like popularity till the 2000s when Mike Leach was like with Texas Tech. And at its core, it was including high percentage passing plays where you can execute them consistently and at a high level and be able to keep the ball moving and maintain possession. These plays were often short, quick passes that are easier to complete. Horizontally stretching the field are used to manipulate the defense, spreading them out and creating gaps. This tactic forced defenders to cover more ground, increasing the likelihood of a defensive lapse. Especially in an offense where it's meant to pass the ball a ton, of course there's going to be a heavy use of pre-snap reads, allowing quarterbacks to make the adjustments based on the defensive alignment, improving the chances of a good play happening. Now, of course, you need an older quarterback that would probably be able to handle what the defense is going to throw at them. But to be fair, you can make that argument with most offenses. You want that experience. But I think a lot of times when I see people play Madden that were former NFL quarterbacks, I'm looking at like Kurt Benkert, the way that he's reading the defense is kind of how you're looking at an air raid. You're looking and reading the safeties to prepare for what could be the play. Is it cover two? Okay, we can check into a screen of some kind. I'm not saying that's a 1-for-1, but that's the mentality that these quarterbacks are going in, because they know they're going to probably pass the ball upwards of 60 times in a game. I'm just now realizing cover two in a screen really doesn't make a ton of sense, but that's not the point. And at its core, the system was designed to maximize talent, enabling teams with less athletic rosters to compete against superior opponents. By focusing on execution and strategy, even less physically dominant teams could find success. And I promise you, as I did research on this video, the three main staples that we'll talk about, and I will show you a little bit more into detail when we go to College Football 25, is mesh, 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 4 verticals, and wide cross. Those are the staples. I say mesh like 8 times primarily because that's the most consistent concept that pops up. These are the plays that are designed to create mismatches and exploit defensive weaknesses, which I'll show in some live time. But let's tie it all back to Lincoln Riley, the point of today's video, because if I start talking about Mike Leach and Hal Mumm a little bit more into detail, we'll be here for an hour. Mike Leach became the face of the air raid. No way around it. At Texas Tech, that's when it became a gimmick offense to an actual competent and explosive offense, to be honest. Then Washington State, and then Mississippi State. His success at these programs brought national attention to the air raid system. Other disciples such as Sonny Dykes, Dana Holgorsen, Cliff Kingsbury carried the system into new contexts, including the NFL. You will see so many different concepts of the air raid within the NFL. It was normalized. I don't think there's a single passing concept or passing-based system at this level of football in the modern era that doesn't have air raid complexity to it. But like every offensive system, there is a weakness. So what's the clear weakness of the air raid? I'm sure a lot of people would say, oh, it's just you can't run the ball. You're missing half of the offensive game, which is the rushing attack. And I don't disagree, but give me a better answer than that. I think you can win a lot of games within the air raid. You can beat up on a lot of teams. If you're able to execute those passing concepts 60 times within a game, because that's, I mean, those are the numbers I remember Washington State putting up, is 60 passing attempts. And if you're able to execute those at a very high level, you're going to win a lot of football games. But what's the difference between elite teams and good teams? Can you beat me in multiple ways? And I think that's the core concept that is missing from the traditional air raid. Because if you're able to stop the passing attack, what's their counterpunch? They're not going to be able to effectively run the football. That's why I feel like the ceiling at Mississippi State was pretty much met, just because I don't know if there was a counterpunch that Mississippi State was going to be able to beat the elite teams within the SEC. And that doesn't even get me involved on the whole concept of scoring too quickly and having your defense on the field consistently. I'm focused on what adjustments can an offensive coordinator make within the air raid to elevate it. And that's when we get to Lincoln Riley. So we go to what is most commonly called the Lincoln Riley balanced air raid. I understand you see the thumbnail and you see the modern air raid, whatever you want to call it. Lincoln Riley transformed the air raid with power running, play action, and quarterback mobility. Lincoln realized that there was a need for a more balanced attack to keep defenses guessing. Lincoln took the philosophy of simplicity and execution and expanded it, addressing the weaknesses that opponents had exploited in the early iterations. By incorporating a strong running game and versatile quarterbacks, the offense became more unpredictable. There was a counterpunch. His version of the air raid retained its explosiveness while embracing a more physical and multidimensional approach. This evolution made the offense more resilient, more adaptable to the different defensive strategies. I fully understand you probably just heard me say Lincoln Riley and physicality in the same sentence in terms of an offensive scheme, and you're typing up a comment right now saying, OMG, you're so stupid. We have been making fun of Lincoln Riley for years for his lack of physicality. My response to you is, conceptually, is rushing the football compared to what we saw with Texas Tech, Washington State, and hell, even Mississippi State, is that attempt at least more of an effort to be more physical than what the predecessors were not even trying to do. Because I'm not even saying they're a Michigan level of physicality, not even close, compared to their predecessors of what the traditional air raid attack was. They're more physical. They're at least trying to run the football. They're trying to have a counterpunch. They're trying to run the ball with the quarterback, which was a wrinkle that was not there before. But now that you understand what Lincoln Riley had made the shift to, let's talk about what that scheme would actually look like and how playing these high percentage, these easy looks like in real time. I understand we're probably going to end up using Miller Moss in College Football 25, and he's not the best in resemblance of what a quarterback under Lincoln Riley looks like. He's in the transfer portal right now, but I want you to just focus on the scheme. Look how easy these passes are for a quarterback to be able to produce at a very high level, and why it becomes so dangerous when you put a high level talent at that quarterback position. So we're going to dive into College Football 25 so you could see some of these concepts in live time. I will show you the traditional air raid looks, the three concepts I talked about earlier, and then we'll dive into what Lincoln Riley has done to adjust his playbook for the counterpunch that I think the air raid desperately needs to have success. And one of those concepts is probably the most used concept in any sports video game history for verticals, or what they call in College Football 25 all go. And as you can see, it's going down the field with every receiver you got, with one check down to the running back. Now, this may be seen as a pretty simple concept. You're just pushing the ball downfield, but why would you run it? Primarily, if you're having a lot of success in the short and intermediate area of the field and able to bring, say, the corners or the safeties closer to the line of scrimmage, and then you could trust your athletes on the outside to be able to make a play and beat their man. A lot of times the quarterbacks are going to be watching, and probably every time, the safeties. Now, you see the two high safety look right now. If I'm a quarterback, I am watching if they're going to roll to the left or the right, basically meaning, are the safeties going to go to a single high safety look and one of the safeties comes crashing down, or are they going to both drop back into coverage? And if they both drop into coverage, I'm most likely checking it down to marks or trying to make a play with my legs. But if they go into single high safety looks, I'm trusting Lane or Hudson, most likely on the outside, to make a play and make a 50-50 ball. So let's take a look, couple reps just so you can see it. I'm sure most of y'all know that this play is pretty simple and most likely used by everyone who has played this video game, that maybe you got a chance to go make a play. I'm not expecting to complete a bunch of plays against this Notre Dame defense, but you guys can see a lot of the 2 high safety looks, and there's a dot. Now you got a single high safety look. You got the tight end over the middle. Good catch. You could see the point. I don't really have to explain 4 verticals a bunch of times for you guys. There's Zachariah Branch over the middle. I know this defense isn't perfect. I know this game isn't perfect, but I want you guys to see this in live time without getting copyright strikes and my channel taken down. In what's probably the most common formation you will see in the spread and in the air raid offense is what we like to call mesh. And what I want you to watch is that middle linebacker. We're going to run it a couple times. The goal of this play is what we talked about conceptually with the air raid, causing traffic and getting the ball to your playmakers in space so that they can make a play. Watch Branch and watch Fair here as they go on these drag routes that overlap with one another. If those corners with the fire emblems are trailing them, it's going to be incredibly difficult to catch up with these players, basically creating what naturally would be called a pick play. Without making it illegal, the guys are just running their routes, and it just so happens that man coverage is on them. This is what the offense is intending to do, is force these players to go horizontally and make plays and make sound tackles, which if you are a better athlete or you're able to execute this at a high level, especially against other teams who can't tackle, you're going to stay in a ton of football games. So let's show you what this would look like in live time. So here's our first rep. It looks like man coverage. You see the bump, and someone's going to most likely get open more times than not. Here we go. Another one, blitz off the right side. It's so difficult, especially with athletes like Branch and a lot of the speed players. Think of Hollywood Brown, CeeDee Lamb. All these guys that had a ton of speed at these other universities made it so difficult to stop plays like this in a very traditional sense of what the air raid is. Mesh is probably the #1 thing you're going to see pop up when we're talking about this specific playbook and play style. And not to mention, before we go on to the next one, look at Lane and look at Hudson intending to spread out the corners even farther. Yes, you could technically throw it, but it would be such a tight window to be able to find maybe a soft spot in the zone. If it's man coverage, you're spreading these corners out even farther using every bit of the field. In worst case, you could always go down to marks for the check down. And for the last concept, we look at Y cross. Now, why is McCree, the tight end, the #1 look here? The first look you try to make. Well, it's designed to potentially create an opening for that crosser to get open. You have guys like Branch, who's going to test the flats on the left side of the field. You have Hudson pressing the safety vertically downfield. And then on the right side, in case McCree is getting covered by man coverage, or say he's getting trailed off by a couple zone coverages, a guy like Lane could potentially sit in a soft spot in the zone. That's what his route is designed to be. So I'm not a huge fan of Y cross overall. I don't see a lot of success from it, but it is a very common part of this offense. So as you can see, if that linebacker does not get enough depth in their zones, that's a touchdown damn near every single time. I want you to watch that a couple times in replay. Watch what the left side of the field is doing as that tight end is getting basically a free convoy of space to make a play. So what has Lincoln Riley done with this offense to improve it? To the point of what I was talking about earlier, being more physical, having a rushing threat, not only with a running back, but look at the past couple of years, who has been most successful. It's been most likely guys that can use their legs a little bit. Even Baker Mayfield had some runs and was mobile, being able to create plays in the backfield. So Lincoln Riley, one of the most common running attacks that he loves to pull is counter. And so what you see right here is an RPO look. You see Hudson. I think Hudson's going to get open compared to what this defense is giving me. But counter is intended to freeze these linebackers. Primarily, you're pulling a tight end and a lineman from the right side to the left side, or from the left side to the right side. And so one of the most common misconceptions, I think a great example is what happened in the SEC championship game just last night. So many people went online and were upset about the Texas linebackers on the final play of the game sitting there and waiting. That's their job in a counter run play, because if they are caught running into a gap way too early in a long developing running play like this, they're basically guessing on what's going to be the opening here. Counters intended to freeze those linebackers, because what other option do they have? If they're going to just run up to the line, even though they know it's a run, counter's going to open up a hole that wasn't there before. Because it's a long developing play, you're pulling two guys across the line of scrimmage. So I know that this doesn't traditionally work in college football 25, but I want you to just watch the linemen, watch how this play is run. I'm not going to throw the ball. I just want you to see how the running back acts, because truly, I think Oklahoma version of Lincoln Riley, you saw the most success from these running backs. And it wasn't just a passing attack that was dangerous. The best version of the Lincoln Riley offense had a very dangerous running attack as well. Here, goes to the outside. There we go. See if that could get a block there. But you see, that hole took so long to develop, but you have to freeze these linebackers, because if they get caught, getting very deep into the run gaps, that is what's going to cause this play to be so successful, as well as freezing them for too long. They have to be so decisive, because in an offense like this where you have RPOs, you are manipulating every level of the field, the linebackers and the safeties, to make a decision quickly and be right in that decision. And just looking through this playbook, look through some of the running plays. A lot of them is pulling people from one side to another, inside zone split, the GT read option. A lot of these plays are intended to pull someone from the left to the right side, having someone in motion. Let's look at this halfback fake jet. Very simply put, you're putting someone in motion, forcing these linebackers to potentially move or not. Now this is going to get blown up because it was zone, but to the point, there's always someone moving. There's always going to be something to manipulate these linebackers and try to identify what defense they're in, because the easier that a quarterback's able to do that, the more dangerous this offense is. Look at RPO counter peak, RPO counter alert. There's so many different RPOs, but not only that, to pull these guys from one side to another, creating more blockers and making it even more difficult. I understand that I've said that Lincoln Riley's not the most physical guy in the world in terms of what his offense demands, but it's for sure more physical than what the traditional air raid looks like. And you'll see a ton of these RPOs and a ton of these getting them behind the line of scrimmage, very quickly getting the ball out. I think a great example is that halfback swing. It's something that you'll see traditionally within a Lincoln Riley offense. It's just getting these guys into space. Just look at all these plays, either crossing over the middle or stretching the ball to the outside from all of these different plays and concepts, and having the defense have to play not only vertically, but horizontally. And I think that's what makes this offense so difficult. So in conclusion, Lincoln Riley has been able to produce an offense that has gotten 3 Heisman winners, 3 of them. And he's been able to take the traditional air raid and manipulate it in a way that the modern offense can handle it, with RPOs, counter run options, a counter punch just in general. But I can't talk about Lincoln Riley without talking about USC in 2024, because one of the biggest issues, I don't think it's the defense. I don't even think it's the quarterback. I think there's 2 major issues, not even talking about the NIL and the structure at USC. I think it's the offensive line, and I think Lincoln Riley might have his sights on an NFL job. I truly believe that, because the way that they have been able to recruit, sure, there's issues with their NIL organization, and that's a deeper rooted problem at USC. But I also think that overall, this offensive line is just not good enough. I look at those teams at Oklahoma, and I don't think it's a Big 10 versus Big 12 problem that a lot of people expected when USC made that jump, because those Oklahoma offenses at their peak was able to handle a team like Georgia till the 4th quarter, to overtime. But I also think that Lincoln Riley has just not recruited at the level that is needed to be able to handle a Big 10 defense. But it's not to say that it's schematically flawed. We're seeing an offense like this at Oregon succeed. But they also have a good offensive line to great offensive line. They also have a great defense to help. They have the capabilities to execute a counterpunch, whereas Lincoln Riley has not. And now he is in what, year 4 or 5? And he's rebuilding again. And I begin to wonder, for an offensive mind like this, is he having sights elsewhere? Because teams are being able to pluck their recruits like it's nothing. They've been able to get the guys to commit, but not follow through with it. And I begin to wonder, at what point is Lincoln Riley going to jump ship like he left Oklahoma? If you guys like this video and you like these types of videos talking about the schemes and deep dives, truly leave a like. I'm not one to ask for one, but like, I worked really hard on this video. It would mean the world if you gave me an opportunity to talk football with you, because at the end of the day, all I'll ask from you is to talk some football. And so with that being said, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you guys next time for the next video, which will be why the BCS needs to come back instead of what we have with the 12-team playoff.